I never anticipated celebrating my 68th birthday sleeping in a deserted garage, enveloped by the smell of motor oil and accumulated dust from many decades. Yet I found myself in this place, struggling in the darkness with a key I didn't recognize, my vision obscured by tears as my son's comments echoed loudly. "You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance?" Dad knew that. My hand shook severely as I finally managed to insert the key into the heavily rusted lock. The ancient entry gave a loud protest groan. As I pushed the door open, the light beam from my flashlight sliced through the accumulated decades of darkness. That was the precise moment I observed it. I stopped instantly, my breathing halting as the light illuminated the contents inside. This occurrence seemed impossible. It couldn't be what Robert had intended when he simply left me a garage in his final will. But I need to provide some background. You must understand the circumstances that led to me ending up here, without a home on my birthday, tightly grasping a small suitcase holding the remainder of my 42-year-long marriage. The day began with me standing next to my son at our lawyer office. Jonathan was wearing his perfectly fitted tailored suit. I was wearing the black dress I had used for Robert's burial 3 weeks prior. Hoffman, our family attorney for multiple decades, appeared noticeably uneasy as he got ready to read Robert's final instructions. He started by saying, "Before I begin, I want to assure you that everything is legally binding and precisely as Mr. Campbell instructed, while adjusting his eyeglasses." Looking back now, I recognize that specific statement as the warning it truly was. The reading itself passed in a blur of confusion. However, certain phrases stood out with incredibly painful clarity. "To my son, Jonathan Campbell, I leave our penthouse residence in Los Angeles and my primary investment portfolio." And then, appearing almost like an afterthought, "To my beloved wife, Susan Campbell, I leave the property located at 1420 Industrial Parkway." The garage and its contents. A mere garage. After spending 42 years married, my husband had bestowed upon me only a garage. Jonathan's expression instantly changed from one of serious grief to one of barely contained triumph. I clearly recall his hand resting on my shoulder, applying slightly too much pressure as he leaned in to softly whisper, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I was too deeply shocked to formulate a reply, too confused to even raise questions. Why would Robert do something like this? Where was I expected to reside? What actions was I supposed to take? The answers arrived with brutal clarity later that same evening when Jonathan drove me back to what I still considered my home, the penthouse apartment that overlooked the entire city, a place Robert and I had shared during the last 15 years of our marital life. I had barely walked through the entrance when Jonathan placed my suitcase down in the hallway. He stated, "I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay, Mom." I stared blankly at him, failing to comprehend his meaning. "What are you talking about? The penthouse is mine now. It's explicitly written in the will." His tone had that rehearsed quality he had mastered during professional business negotiations. "I am having some colleagues over tomorrow to discuss converting Dad's study into a functional home office, and I need to begin implementing modifications." "But where am I you supposed to go?" The question emerged small and completely bewildered. Jonathan simply shrugged, a gesture inherently dismissive due to its casualness. "You could stay briefly with Aunt Helen, or there is always that garage Dad left you." His subsequent laugh possessed a cruel edge I had never observed before, however. Why he left you that dump is beyond my understanding. What exactly are you planning to do with it? Open a mechanic shop at your age? I sensed an internal shift within me at that moment, similar to a foundational crumbling. Jonathan, this is my home. Your father and I. It's not your home anymore. He abruptly interrupted me, his voice becoming harsh. It's mine. Dad made that perfectly clear. I reached for the back of a nearby chair to stabilize myself. I require time to locate alternative accommodation. Surely you don't expect me to vacate tonight. That was the instant he uttered those words. The exact words that would reverberate repeatedly in my mind for countless hours afterward as I drove without destination around the city, eventually finding myself on an unfamiliar street within the industrial sector, gazing directly at a severely dilapidated garage secured by a padlock on its door. You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance? Dad knew that. The unexpected nature of the cruelty, so completely inconsistent with the son I believed I had raised, left me entirely incapable of responding. I simply retrieved my suitcase, my purse, and the key mister Hoffman had provided me after the will reading, and walked straight out. So I was standing right here, positioned in the wide-open doorway of a garage that seemed completely forgotten. My flashlight beam revealing something so profoundly unexpected that I couldn't fully process the visual information. This was because the interior space was not filled with unwanted junk or abandoned tools as I had originally anticipated. The space directly before me contained 3 distinct vehicles, each meticulously covered with custom-fitted cloth covers, arranged with exceptional precision. However, it was the brightly gleaming object partially visible near the front of the garage that momentarily caused my heart to stop beating. It was the unmistakable silver grille of what appeared to be a genuine vintage Aston Martin. Its perfectly polished surface reflecting the light from my flashlight like a powerful beacon cutting through the surrounding darkness. What precisely was this? And why in the world had Robert successfully kept this entire situation hidden from me throughout all these years? I advanced forward, pulled by an intense combination of confusion and mounting curiosity, completely unaware that I was on the brink of discovering just how thoroughly I had misunderstood the true meaning of my husband's final intended gift. My fingers began to tremble uncontrollably as I gently pulled the custom-fitted cover away from the Aston Martin. The soft fabric slid away, instantly revealing a pristine silver Burt 1964 DB5. Absolutely identical to the specific model Sean Connery drove in those James Bond motion pictures that Robert enjoyed so. What? The automobile shimmered under the direct beam of my flashlight, as if it had only just been driven off the production line at the factory, and not as if it had been stored within this obscure garage for an unknowable duration. Robert, I whispered into the surrounding quietness. What exactly were you involved in? My husband had never once mentioned having a hobby of collecting cars. During our 42 years of marriage, there had never been the slightest hint of this passion, or perhaps it was an investment, or even a secret life. I couldn't even determine the correct term to describe it. I shifted my attention to the next vehicle, my heart starting to beat rapidly as I gently began to pull away its protective cover. A 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300SL Gullwing instantly appeared. Its uniquely distinctive doors and elegant, flowing lines were unmistakable, even to my own untrained eye. The deep blue paintwork was completely flawless. The chrome decorative details caught the beam of my flashlight like scattered, sparkling stars. The third cloth cover concealed a Ferrari, specifically a 1967-75 GT Bauer, according to the information on a small plaque mounted on a stand positioned next to it. Its intense deep red shade brought to mind the type of wine Robert would frequently order during our wedding anniversaries, rich and deeply intense. Each specific car was accompanied by a leather portfolio containing what seemed to be important documentation, including provenance papers, comprehensive maintenance records, and original purchase agreements. I did not claim to be an expert, but even I intuitively understood that these were not merely pleasant old vehicles. These were true museum-quality treasures, worth a monetary amount I couldn't even begin to estimate. "There must be a logical explanation," I murmured softly, my voice seeming strangely loud within the utterly silent garage space. That's when I observed the envelope securely taped onto the wall right next to a light switch. The envelope had my personal name written on it in Robert's distinctly recognizable handwriting. With fingers that absolutely refused to stop shaking, I pulled the envelope down and located the light switch, instantly flooding the entire garage area with completely unexpected brightness emanating from modern LED fixtures recessed high into the ceiling. The sudden intense illumination revealed unequivocally that this was certainly not a typical garage. The space had been professionally and completely finished, featuring advanced climate control systems, specialized custom flooring, extensive security features, and dedicated specialized storage areas constructed along the walls. This was definitively not some kind of neglected, abandoned structure. It was a deliberately and meticulously designed automotive sanctuary. I slowly sank down onto a comfortable leather bench that was positioned against one specific wall, the envelope feeling quite heavy within my trembling hands. After a brief moment of hesitation, I broke the seal and carefully pulled out several pages of Robert's characteristic stationery. "My dearest Susan, if you happen to be reading this, then I have passed away, and you have successfully discovered what I have come to regard as my final meaningful gift to you. First, I must sincerely apologize for the profound shock and confusion you must surely be experiencing right now. The intentional secrecy was never intended to cause you harm, but rather to safeguard the crucial future I was carefully constructing for you. 6 years ago, when I received my initial medical diagnosis, the attending doctors projected I had 5 years at most. I successfully surpassed their timeline by a full year, but I recognized that our time remaining together was strictly limited, and I urgently needed to ensure you would be completely taken care of following my departure. I paused my reading, deliberately blinking back gathering tears. Robert's diagnosis of progressive heart failure had been emotionally shattering, but he consistently minimized its severity, constantly insisting he had abundant time remaining. I had been entirely unaware that he had been actively planning for the final end from the very beginning stages. I know you are currently perplexed about the contents of the will, about the specific reason why I would leave our shared home to John instead of directly to you. Believe me, this particular decision resulted in more sleepless nights for me than my actual health condition ever did. But over the course of the last decade, I have observed a distinct change in our son. The ambitious young man we diligently raised has transformed into something fundamentally different. Something much colder and more calculating than I ever truly wanted him to become. The truth is simply this: I greatly feared the potential consequences for you if I bequeathed absolutely everything to both of you jointly, or even if I decided to divide the assets equally. Jonathan would certainly have devised methods to control the assets, to manage your portion for your benefit, as he would inevitably phrase it. I have personally witnessed the way he addresses you when he erroneously assumes I am not present to hear. How consistently he dismisses your specific opinions and fundamental needs. A single tear forcefully splashed onto the stationery, slightly blurring the ink text. I had been completely oblivious that Robert had even noticed those painful interactions. I had perpetually generated excuses for Jonathan's habitually dismissive conduct, repeatedly telling myself that he was simply overly busy or just highly stressed because of his career. Therefore, I intentionally orchestrated this divided inheritance with very specific, deliberate objectives. Jonathan has received what he will perceive as the highly valuable portion, the penthouse, the highly visible investment accounts, the status symbols. But what you are presently observing, my dearest love, constitutes the true underlying wealth. These three exceptional vehicles alone are valued at approximately $12 million. The provided documentation will conclusively verify their genuine provenance, and you will discover the essential contact information for Marcus Weatherby, my highly trusted dealer and personal advisor throughout these specific acquisitions. He is available to assist you with whatever specific course of action you ultimately decide to pursue regarding them. $12 million. I slowly looked up at the three silent, gleaming machines, their highly polished surfaces perfectly reflecting the bright overhead lights. That monetary value could potentially be accurate, but the automobiles were described as merely the starting point. In the secure safe located directly behind the framed photograph of us in Venice, the combination access code is our anniversary date. You will locate comprehensive documentation for numerous investment properties I have systematically acquired over the past 6 years, all meticulously placed within a living trust structure that legally transferred directly into your name immediately upon my death. You will also find all necessary banking information for several accounts that should reliably furnish you with a perfectly comfortable income for the entirety of your remaining life. My hand was shaking so violently that I was momentarily compelled to set the handwritten letter down. There was a hidden safe. I looked around the room and immediately spotted the framed photograph hanging prominently on the wall. It was an image of Robert and me standing together on the Rialto Bridge, genuinely laughing as a talented street musician serenaded us during our trip celebrating our 35th anniversary. I rose slowly, feeling slightly unsteady, and walked toward the picture. The safe opened with a quiet, soft click sound once I correctly input our anniversary date. Inside the compartment, I discovered a thick portfolio containing numerous documents and several USB drives, all neatly and clearly labeled. The topmost document within the portfolio was specifically titled Estate of Robert Campbell, Complete Asset Inventory for Susan Campbell. I quickly flipped it open and instantly felt the necessity to sit down again as extensive columns of complex numbers and detailed property descriptions blurred before my eyes. There were apartment buildings located in Seattle, commercial properties situated in Chicago, a small functioning vineyard nestled in Northern California, diverse stock portfolios, bonds, and various private equity investments. The total value listed prominently at the bottom of the page made my ears temporarily ring. With fingers now feeling numb, I returned my focus to reading Robert's letter. I recognize that this information is completely overwhelming, and I am deeply sorry for withholding all of this from you. Initially, it commenced merely as a project designed to channel my considerable anxiety regarding the future. But as the overall portfolio consistently expanded, I realized that disclosing it prematurely might inherently jeopardize it if Jonathan somehow discovered the true extent of these specific holdings. You are likely questioning why I did not simply protect you using more conventional, standard methods. The inherent truth is, I genuinely wanted to afford Jonathan a definite opportunity to reveal his true character. Perhaps when confronted with his substantial inheritance and the perceived responsibility for caring for you, he might rise to become the capable man we dedicated ourselves to raising, if he has successfully proven himself worthy, if he has securely guaranteed your comfort and overall security. Then perhaps you might subsequently choose to share a portion of this immense wealth with him. But if he has instead revealed a different, problematic nature, well then, this legacy serves as your ultimate protection against that unfortunate reality, ensuring your complete independence. Your absolute freedom. I was forced to stop reading once more as a quiet sob escaped involuntarily from me. Robert had known the truth. He had accurately anticipated the exact sequence of events that would unfold. He had foreseen precisely how Jonathan would react upon gaining control of the penthouse property. I have consistently held the belief that a person's character reveals itself most transparently during moments concerning inheritance, encompassing both what we are given and what we strongly believe we inherently deserve. Jonathan is receiving a challenging test just as much as he is receiving an inheritance. And you, my dearest love, are being granted the necessary means to fully live the remaining portion of your life exactly according to your own choices, truly beholden to absolutely no one. All my enduring love, presently and eternally, Robert. I firmly clutched the letter close to my chest, tears now streaming freely down my face. After 42 years spent in marriage, I firmly believed I knew everything conceivable about my husband. Instead, it appeared I was only just beginning to comprehend the true profound depth of his devoted love and remarkable foresight as I sat completely surrounded by the millions of dollars worth of automotive art. The inherent irony of the situation was completely apparent to me. Only a few short hours earlier, my own son had forcefully evicted me from what I thought was my permanent home, labeling me a useless old woman while simultaneously believing he had secured the highly valuable inheritance. How profoundly mistaken he had been regarding every aspect. I spent that inaugural night resting on a comfortable leather sofa that I discovered within a small, adjacent office area located inside the garage complex. It was not until the following morning that I achieved a full appreciation for the meticulous extent of Robert's thorough preparations. The small office space contained a compact, fully functional bathroom, complete with a shower, a mini refrigerator unit, adequately stocked with bottles of water and basic provisions, and even a small hanging closet containing several complete changes of clothing in my specific size, still possessing the retail tags attached. My highly practical husband had logically foreseen that I might require temporary shelter here. Daylight illumination revealed additional significant details I had entirely missed due to my heightened emotional state the preceding night. The garage was clearly not a neglected industrial location, but rather a facility meticulously renovated with state-of-the-art security installations, specialized climate control systems, and customized lighting deliberately engineered to showcase the vehicles within. What appeared heavily dilapidated from the external view was entirely intentional camouflage, expertly concealing the extremely valuable treasures inside. After consuming a simple breakfast consisting of granola bars and bottled water, I dialed the telephone number for Marcus Weatherby that Robert had thoughtfully included within his letter. Despite the unusually early hour, he promptly answered on the second ring, Mrs. Campbell, he stated, his distinctive British accent unmistakable. I have actually been expecting your call. First, please graciously accept my sincere condolences regarding your loss. Robert was not merely a business client, but also a valued friend. Thank you, Mr. Weatherby, I replied, my voice still slightly rough from my recent crying. I feel rather overwhelmed. I only managed to discover the existence of the garage and its remarkable contents last night. Yes, Robert specifically mentioned that you would not be informed until following his passing. I am fully prepared and happy to address any questions you may have and assist you in any way possible. Would you prefer me to travel to the garage location? Approximately 2 hours later, a highly distinguished gentleman, appearing to be in his 60s, arrived in an unpretentious modest sedan, parking with obvious care directly beside my old Toyota. Marcus Weatherby looked precisely as his voice had suggested, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a fine tweed jacket adorned with leather patches at the elbows. and carrying a thin leather portfolio case. "Mrs. Campbell," he greeted me, extending his hand politely. "It is truly a pleasure to meet you, although I sincerely wish it were occurring under more cheerful circumstances." As we comfortably settled ourselves into the office area, enjoying coffee he had brought in a thermos, Marcus assisted me in beginning to grasp the full comprehensive scope of what Robert had expertly created. "Your husband initiated the acquisition of these specific vehicles approximately 6 years ago," he carefully explained, opening his portfolio. "He approached this endeavor with extraordinary methodical precision. Each individual purchase was rigorously researched for complete authenticity, documented provenance, and its investment potential." "But why focus on cars?" I inquired, still struggling to mentally connect this intense passion with the husband I had confidently believed I knew completely. Robert never exhibited any specific interest in automobiles beyond our regular family vehicles. Marcus responded with a gentle smile. He once explained his reasoning to me. He stated that cars were tangible, visually appealing assets that inherently delivered joy simply through their existence. Unlike fluctuating stocks or bonds, they could be profoundly appreciated across multiple distinct levels. As forms of genuine art, as impressive engineering marvels, as valuable historical artifacts, and also as dependable financial investments. He desired to leave you something you could physically observe and physically interact with, not merely columns of complex numbers presented on a statement document. My throat suddenly constricted at this intimate insight into Robert's deliberate thought process. It was highly characteristic of him, simultaneously practical, yet also profoundly thoughtful. "The current collection is valued at approximately $12 million, precisely as Robert indicated within his letter," Marcus continued. "However, its inherent value has been consistently and steadily rising. These particular models are firmly regarded as blue-chip investments within the specialized collector car community." "And what exactly am I expected to do with them?" I asked, gesturing vaguely toward the 3 brightly gleaming vehicles. "Whatever you ultimately wish, Mrs. Campbell. You possess the option to sell them individually or as a single collection. You could meticulously maintain them solely as long-term investments. You could even decide to drive them, although doing so would slightly diminish their collector value." He paused, carefully studying my expression. "There is absolutely no need to rush your decision. Robert arranged and paid for secure storage and professional maintenance services for the subsequent 5 years. After Marcus departed, having promised to return whenever I required his presence, I remained seated within the quiet garage, deeply contemplating my entirely new situation. Less than 24 hours earlier, I had firmly believed I was essentially without a home, abruptly cast out by my son, and seemingly mysteriously disinherited by my husband. Now I was gradually discovering that I was actually a wealthy woman with a range of options I had never remotely conceived of. Yet, I still had no place to permanently reside except for this unusual garage with its specialized hidden amenities. I dedicated the remainder of the day to meticulously examining the portfolio retrieved from the safe, slowly starting to grasp the comprehensive extent of Robert's secret financial planning. Beyond the 3 cars, he had skillfully assembled an impressive collection comprising income-producing properties and various investments, all expertly structured to transfer seamlessly to me upon the event of his passing. One specific document particularly captured my focused attention, the deed pertaining to a modest but undeniably charming cottage located in Carmel, a beautiful coastal community we had visited multiple times over the years and consistently cherished. According to the accompanying paperwork, Robert had successfully purchased the property 4 years ago, and it was completely furnished and prepared for immediate occupancy. I realized I possessed a genuine home, a real dwelling, not merely this garage, regardless of how valuable its contents might be. As the evening hours approached, my phone vibrated with an incoming call, Jonathan's number visibly flashing on the screen. I briefly hesitated, then decided to answer, feeling curious about what he might say following our last strained interaction. "Mom, where exactly are you?" His voice conveyed irritation rather than genuine concern. "Aunt Helen stated you haven't been in touch with her." "I am doing well, Jonathan," I replied, deliberately maintaining a neutral tone. "I found alternative accommodation." "Well, I need you to promptly collect the remaining quantity of your personal belongings from the penthouse. I have the interior designers scheduled to commence work tomorrow morning, and they require everything to be completely cleared out." There was no utterance of an apology, nor any acknowledgement of his preceding cruelty. Just a string of additional demands and dismissive instructions. "I understand," I responded, a strange sense of calmness settling over my emotions. "And when would be the most convenient time for you?" "Tomorrow morning before 9. I have numerous meetings scheduled all day." I thoughtfully considered the documents spread before me. These documents served as undeniable proof of Robert's extremely careful planning and his deep, enduring love. I reflected upon the son who could so casually dispose of his own mother when she became mildly inconvenient, and I made a firm decision. "I will be present," I stated. After successfully ending the call, I immediately contacted Marcus back and inquired if he could recommend a highly competent attorney specializing specifically in estate matters. By the precise moment night fully descended, I had successfully scheduled appointments with both legal counsel and a financial advisor for the subsequent afternoon. I spent my second night staying in the garage office far more comfortably than the initial night, my mind no longer reeling with shock, but instead methodically organizing my subsequent action plan. I thought intently about Robert, vividly imagining him carefully orchestrating this elaborate protective arrangement specifically for me, all the while keeping it completely concealed to shield it from Jonathan's potential interference. "You knew him significantly better than I did," I softly whispered toward Robert's memory as I gradually drifted toward sleep, referring to our own son. The realization was undeniably painful, yet intensely clarifying. Robert's unusually structured will had certainly not represented a rejection of me, but rather a profound demonstration of love and remarkable foresight. He had willingly sacrificed having me participate in his secret project during his final years specifically to ensure that I would achieve true independence after he had passed. Tomorrow I would confront Jonathan once more, collect whatever specific personal treasures remained within what had previously been our shared home, and subsequently commence my entirely new life, one that Robert had meticulously engineered for me from the secrecy of the shadows. As I succumbed to sleep, I found myself intensely curious about the exact expression that would appear on Jonathan's face if he ever discovered the contents housed within the worthless garage he had so easily ridiculed. But that eventual revelation, assuming it ever came to pass, would occur solely on my specified terms and according to my timeline. For the present time, one possessed the substantial advantage of being significantly underestimated, merely a useless old woman who secretly possessed a hidden fortune, and an increasing determination to fully honor Robert's final loving gift by utilizing it wisely. The next morning, I arrived at the penthouse residence precisely at 8:45 a.m., having taken particular care with my overall appearance in a manner I had neglected for several weeks. I wore one of the brand new outfits retrieved from the garage closet, a simple yet elegant navy pantsuit that fit surprisingly well, and I had meticulously styled my hair. These were small acts of defiance perhaps, but they successfully fortified me for the imminent confrontation. Jonathan opened the door while holding his phone, barely glancing up as I entered the dwelling that had been my home for 15 years. The space already felt noticeably different, seemingly emptier and colder somehow. Several of my decorative objects were conspicuously absent, and the family photographs that had previously lined the hallway had been removed, leaving behind faint, ghostly rectangular outlines on the walls. Finally, he stated, securely tucking his phone into his pocket, "I've carefully boxed up the majority of your personal items. The designers are scheduled to arrive at 9:30, so we need to proceed with efficiency." There was no greeting whatsoever. No inquiry concerning where I had spent the night after he had effectively ejected me from my home. Just an immediate, intense focus on his own personal convenience. "Good morning to you, too, Jonathan," I replied, my voice sounding more stable than I had anticipated. "I observe that you have already initiated the redecorating process." He responded with a shrug, proceeding to lead me toward the master bedroom area, where several large cardboard boxes were stacked upon what had been my specific side of the bed. There's no purpose in waiting. The entire residence requires a complete modernization to maximize its market value. Its value. I echoed the word. You are intending to sell it eventually. It's excessively large for just one person, and the market conditions are exceptionally favorable right now. I estimate I'll execute the renovation, enjoy living here for roughly a year or so, then successfully flip it for a significant profit. The casual, offhand dismissal of the home Robert and I had carefully established together caused a sharp sting, but I merely acknowledged him with a nod. "I see, and Robert's belongings." Jonathan vaguely indicated toward more boxes situated in the corner. I decided to keep the Rolex watch and his cufflink collection. The remainder is merely clothes and old man stuff. You can take whatever specific items you desire. The rest will be sent to donation. Old man stuff, I softly repeated, moving toward the boxes. Inside the very first box, I discovered Robert's cherished books, his comprehensive collection of vintage fountain pens, and the wool sweater I had gifted him the previous Christmas, which still faintly held his scent. Each item was a genuine piece of the man I had dearly loved, now designated as being worthless by our son. I systematically began sifting through the remaining boxes, carefully setting aside all the items that held personal value for me, while Jonathan restlessly paced, visibly checking his watch every few minutes. "Can't you accelerate this process?" he finally snapped impatiently. "It's merely stuff, Mom. You don't even have a place adequate to store all of it." I looked directly up at him, truly observing the man my son had actually become. He was handsome, like his father, but entirely lacking Robert's warmth or compassion visible in his eyes. When exactly had that transformation occurred? When had ambition and intense materialism hollowed him out so completely? "I do possess a place," I stated quietly. "And I will take precisely as much time as I deem necessary. These are not merely possessions, Jonathan. They represent treasured memories." He dismissively rolled his eyes. "Fine. I must attend to phone calls. Just ensure you are finished by 9:30. He deliberately strode out of the room without looking back. As I continued the process of carefully selecting the items that mattered most deeply to me, I found myself progressing through distinct stages of grief, not exclusively for Robert, but also for the son I had mistakenly believed I had raised. Had he consistently been this cold, this utterly dismissive? Had I simply willfully refused to acknowledge it, repeatedly making easy excuses for his increasingly callous conduct over the preceding years? Robert, however, had clearly perceived the situation. Clearly enough, in fact, to meticulously devise an elaborate, comprehensive plan to successfully protect me from our own child. When I concluded selecting what held the highest importance for me, I located Jonathan in what had previously been Robert's private study, now partially emptied of its former contents. My husband's magnificent mahogany desk, the one he had inherited directly from his own father, was now gone, replaced by some sleek glass and chrome monstrosity that looked more like a spacecraft component than conventional furniture. "I am finished," I announced clearly from the doorway. Jonathan briefly glanced up from his laptop computer. "Great. Do you require assistance carrying the items down?" "I can contact the doorman for help." "That would be genuinely appreciated." "Thank you." I briefly hesitated, then added, "I would like to bid a proper farewell to the premises, if you don't object. 15 years of shared memories warrants a few moments of personal reflection." Something briefly flickered within his expression, perhaps irritation, impatience, possibly a fleeting hint of guilt, but he nodded agreement. "Sure, whatever you wish. Just be sure to lock up the apartment when you depart. I need to meet the interior designers downstairs immediately." He brushed past me without uttering another word, intentionally leaving me completely alone within the rapidly emptying penthouse. I took my time, slowly walking through every single room, quietly saying silent goodbyes to the space where Robert and I had spent our later years together. In our large bedroom, I opened the closet doors one final time, gently running my fingers across the few remaining articles of Robert's clothing that Jonathan had not yet boxed up. At the very back corner of the closet, I noticed an item. Robert's old leather messenger bag, forcefully pushed into the corner as if it had been hastily concealed. I pulled it out, unzipping the compartment to find a sealed envelope contained inside, featuring my name distinctly written on it, along with a brief note. "If you manage to find this, Susan, it constitutes an extra backup copy of absolutely everything located within the garage safe, just in case." My incredibly clever, highly thorough husband was creating backups for his existing backups. I securely tucked the envelope into my purse, recognizing it as an unexpected final treasure gained from this visit. After the helpful doorman had finished assisting me in loading my selected possessions into my car, I took one last, lingering look at the entire building before driving completely away. I experienced a strange, complex combination of profound loss and sudden liberation. The penthouse had definitely been our mutual home, thoroughly filled with memories, both exceptionally beautiful and occasionally painful. But it had never truly belonged to me in the precise way Robert had intended the garage and its contents to be mine. I drove immediately to the law offices of Patricia Winters, the attorney that Marcus had highly recommended. She was an impressive woman in her 50s, possessing keen, intelligent eyes and an aura of formidable competence that instantly provided me with a sense of ease. "Mrs. Campbell," she greeted me warmly, shaking my hand with reassuring firmness. "I have thoroughly reviewed the documents you successfully forwarded. Your husband successfully engineered quite an extraordinary estate plan." "Yes," I readily agreed, settling comfortably into the chair situated across from her large desk. "I am still actively attempting to comprehend the entirety of it. From my expert assessment, everything appears to be in completely impeccable order. The trust structures are legally sound, the asset transfers are clean and finalized. He clearly collaborated with highly excellent counsel." She leaned slightly forward. "What I genuinely seek to understand is what goals you hope to successfully achieve now." I considered her pointed question with great care. "I urgently need to secure my overall future, locate a permanent place to establish residency, and completely understand my full financial position." I paused momentarily, then added, "And I need to conclusively determine the appropriate way to handle my relationship with my son moving forward." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. Based on what you have shared concerning recent events, that final point may ultimately prove to be the most complex. Have you reached a decision regarding whether to inform him about the full extent of your inheritance? Not yet, I candidly admitted. A part of me strongly desires for him to continue holding the belief that I possess absolutely nothing except for a worthless garage. Let him fully experience the consequences stemming from his actions and attitudes, but I am not entirely certain that constitutes the correct ethical approach either. There is absolutely no need to rush that crucial decision, she confidently assured me. For the immediate future, let us concentrate on ensuring you are fully settled and secure. I strongly suggest you make a visit to the Carmel property as soon as practically possible. If it adequately meets your specific needs, you can commence transitioning your life there immediately. By the conclusion of our 2-hour meeting session, I possessed a clearly defined action plan. Visit the cottage located in Carmel, meet with the specialized financial team that had been managing Robert's secret investments, and deliberately take ample time in making decisions regarding the cars and other significant assets. As I departed Patricia's office, my phone suddenly buzzed with a text message from Jonathan. Designers enthusiastically approve of the space. Proceeding with a complete gut renovation. Dropped your old photo albums at Helen's residence since you neglected to take them. No inquiry concerning whether I wanted those valuable family photos. No expression of concern regarding my current accommodation or how I was managing emotionally. Just the casual, convenient disposal of additional memories he considered worthless. I chose not to send a response. Instead, I placed a phone call to successfully book a hotel reservation in Carmel for that same night. It was now the appropriate time to visit the permanent home Robert had meticulously prepared for me, the genuine inheritance he had intended all along. As I drove away from the city toward the scenic coastal highway, I felt a noticeable weight gently lifting off my shoulders. For the very first time since Robert's passing, I was not merely reacting defensively to the feelings of loss and profound shock. I was actively moving with deliberate purpose towards something entirely new. Whatever life events awaited me in Carmel, whatever difficult decisions lay ahead concerning Jonathan and the substantial fortune Robert had secretly accumulated, I would face them entirely on my own chosen terms. The useless old woman whom my son had so easily dismissed was successfully rediscovering her innate strength, 1 mile traveled at a time. The extensive coastal drive toward Carmel successfully soothed something deep within my soul that had felt raw and exposed ever since Robert's death. As Highway 1 gracefully curved along the steep cliffs, affording beautiful, periodic glimpses of the Pacific Ocean's vast blue expanse, I felt myself breathing more deeply and fully than I had managed in weeks. The late afternoon sun cast a warm golden illumination over everything, suggesting that nature itself was welcoming me to this entirely new chapter of my life. I carefully followed the directions provided by the GPS device through Carmel's truly charming downtown area, characterized by its unique fairy tale cottages and upscale boutiques, then proceeded down tree-lined streets that increasingly took on a residential quality. When the navigation system announced arriving at destination, I successfully pulled up before a humble stone cottage partially concealed behind mature cypress trees. The property was neither expansive nor ostentatious, but it distinctly radiated both charm and absolute privacy. A natural wood gate structure led to a flagstone pathway that gently wound through a small, but obviously beautifully maintained garden. Using the specific key retrieved from the document packet, I successfully unlocked the Dutch door and stepped inside the dwelling. The immediate interior stopped me completely in my tracks. Every minute detail seemed to have been personally chosen specifically with me in mind. The living room space featured custom built-in bookshelves surrounding a prominent stone fireplace. furnished with comfortable seating options in the precise colours and preferred styles I had consistently favoured. Abundant natural light streamed in through the multi-paned windows, expertly illuminating the hardwood floors, which were elegantly covered with hand-woven rugs displaying subtle patterns. I progressed through the space feeling utterly amazed. The kitchen area had been updated, but retained a traditional aesthetic, complete with a small breakfast nook offering a pleasant view overlooking the garden. The single bedroom was designed to be cozy rather than large in size, but it provided access to a private patio offering a subtle glimpse of the ocean situated between adjacent neighbouring properties. However, it was the small study located just off the main living room that finally broke through my emotional composure. Positioned directly above a simple writing desk, hung a painting that I instantly recognized, a watercolor depiction of the Venice Canal where Robert had originally proposed to me. Created by a street artist all those decades earlier. We had tragically lost the original piece during a residential move years ago, but here was an absolutely perfect replica, as if Robert had personally commissioned it directly from my memory. The tears began to flow then, but not the desperate, wrenching sobs of recent weeks, but rather a gentle, profound release. Robert had meticulously crafted this specific space for my benefit with such care, such dedicated attention to all the small things that would unfailingly bring me comfort and genuine joy. Even in the event of his death, he was actively caring for my well-being in complex ways I was only beginning to fully understand. I slowly sank onto a cushioned window seat, upholstered in my favourite exact shade of blue, watching the final remaining light of the day gently filter through the surrounding trees. For the first time since receiving the initial news of the will's contents, I genuinely felt completely at home. A soft, gentle knock at the front door roused me from my deep contemplation. Upon opening it, I encountered an elegant woman appearing to be in her 70s, standing right on my doorstep, holding a covered dish in her hands. "Hello," she said with genuine warmth. "You must certainly be Susan. I am Margaret Winters, your neighbour, situated 2 doors down the street. Robert personally requested that I keep watch for the moment you arrived." I blinked in sheer surprise. "You actually knew Robert?" She nodded in confirmation, kindly offering me the dish. "He visited several times over the last few years, actively preparing the cottage. I am one of the very few individuals who was privy to the knowledge of his project. He made me explicitly promise not to initiate contact until you eventually came to claim the property." Her eyes crinkled kindly. "It is merely a simple casserole dish. I thought you might prefer not to worry about cooking dinner on your very first night here." I accepted the offered dish, feeling oddly touched by this continuation of Robert's enduring care. "Thank you. Would you care to step inside?" Over shared tea in the kitchen, Margaret provided me with specific details that successfully filled more of the numerous gaps in my understanding. Robert was extremely meticulous about achieving complete correctness in every aspect, she carefully explained. He would frequently bring photographs of your former home in the city, diligently attempting to capture your established aesthetic, while simultaneously creating something that truly belonged here in C. Ahmed. I had absolutely no idea he was undertaking any of this, I confessed. He maintained complete secrecy about it. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. He mentioned that precise fact. He claimed it was specifically for your protection, although he chose not to elaborate further. She studied me with a gentle, direct gaze. He did clearly state that when you finally arrived, you might be in need of a friend, someone who truly understood the experience of reconstructing a life following a significant loss. You have experienced loss yourself, haven't you? My husband passed away 8 years ago. She offered a soft smile. Life changes, even if it doesn't necessarily become easier. Having supportive neighbours helped significantly. By the moment Margaret left, after promising to introduce me to other members of the community once I felt adequately prepared, I had acquired an even deeper appreciation for Robert's remarkable thoroughness. He had not simply provided me with essential financial security and a physical house. He had also carefully considered my necessary emotional and social needs as well. That specific night I slept soundly within the cottage's extremely comfortable bedroom, gently lulled by the distant persistent sound of ocean waves and the quiet, rhythmic tick of a grandfather clock situated in the hallway which distinctly reminded me of the one in my childhood home. For the very first time since Robert's death, my sleep was deep and completely undisturbed. The next morning, I explored the cottage more comprehensively in the bright daylight. Inside the study desk, I located a folder containing all the essential practical information I might require, the names of local medical doctors, various service providers, community resources, and even a membership to the local public library already prepaid in my official name. I also found a handwritten personal note tucked carefully into the desk, dated just 3 months prior to Robert's death. My dearest Susan, if you are presently reading this, you have successfully located your way to Carmel and the permanent home I sincerely hope will bring you both peace and genuine joy. I wish more than anything imaginable that I were able to share this next major chapter of our lives with you, watching the colourful sunset from the peaceful garden, walking the secluded beach in the early morning fog. I recognise that this transition period cannot be easy for you. You are currently facing enormous, life-altering changes, some resulting from your own choice and others dictated by circumstances completely beyond your personal control. But I have consistently admired your inherent resilience, even during times when you severely doubted it yourself. The cottage is entirely yours to utilize however you ultimately wish. As a permanent primary residence, a convenient getaway location, or even to sell if it eventually proves unsuitable for you. My sole hope remains that it provides you with a truly fresh start, completely free from obligations or expectations that do not genuinely contribute to your personal happiness. I love you eternally, Robert. I pressed the delicate paper document against my chest, simultaneously feeling deeply bereft and profoundly loved. Even now, Robert was implicitly granting me permission to independently chart my own individual course, to make crucial decisions solely based on my personal needs rather than any perceived obligations. To his memory. Over the course of the next 3 days, I comfortably settled into a gentle exploring rhythm involving morning walks along the beach, familiarizing myself with the town's various shops and cafes, and meeting a few friendly neighbours Margaret had introduced me to. Each subsequent evening, I returned to the cottage that progressively felt more and more like my own property, not merely a place Robert had prepared. On the 4th day, as I was enjoying my morning coffee within the peaceful garden, my phone rang displaying a familiar number, Jonathan. I hesitated before answering the call, consciously aware of the negative impact our last interaction had imposed upon me. "Hello, Jonathan," I said, maintaining a neutral conversational tone. "Mom, where exactly are you located?" His voice carried that recognizable impatient inflection. "Aunt Helen reported you have not been staying with her, and you are also not answering at your friend Ruth's place either." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee before replying. "I am dedicating some time strictly for myself, Jonathan. I successfully located a place to stay." "What precisely does that statement signify?" "What place?" "You cannot simply vanish without informing anyone of your whereabouts." "I am currently not prepared to discuss my specific whereabouts," I replied, feeling slightly surprised by my own unexpected firmness. "Was there any particular matter you urgently required?" There was a noticeable pause. Then his voice immediately shifted into what I recognized as his business negotiation tone. Actually, yes. I have been meticulously going through Dad's financial papers more thoroughly, and I uncovered certain references to supplemental investments that were not specifically covered during the will reading session. I strongly suspect there might be certain accounts or specific properties that remain unknown to us currently. My heart rate immediately increased, but I managed to keep my voice completely steady. Oh, what specific kind of references are you speaking of? Nothing explicitly specific. Only cryptic notes regarding meetings held with financial advisors I fail to recognize. Some vague, cryptic comments concerning securing future assets. I thought you might possess some relevant knowledge about this. Your father traditionally handled the majority of our financial affairs, I stated, which was accurate enough information. If there are truly additional assets, I am certain Mr. Hoffman would have brought them to our attention. Perhaps, Jonathan stated, sounding clearly unconvinced. Listen, when are you planning to return to the city? We should immediately discuss this face-to-face. I have the penthouse completely dismantled for the renovations, but we could certainly arrange to meet elsewhere. I am uncertain exactly when I will be returning, I replied honestly. I genuinely require this time away. His growing frustration was intensely palpable, even conveyed over the telephone connection. Mom, this entire situation is utterly ridiculous. You cannot simply wander off without clearly informing anyone where you are going. What if an emergency situation were to arise? What if something unfortunate were to happen directly to you? I am perfectly fine, Jonathan. I am not wandering off, and I am not alone. I am simply taking the necessary space to successfully process everything that has occurred. This behavior is highly uncharacteristic of you, he countered, a tone of accusation infiltrating his voice. First, Dad leaves you virtually nothing significant in the will, then you completely disappear without uttering a single word. People are definitely going to talk about this. I nearly laughed outright at the immense irony. Allow them to talk, Jonathan. I am entirely beyond caring about outward appearances at this specific stage. After concluding the call with only vague, non-committal assurances that I would make contact when I felt prepared, I sat quietly in the garden, reflecting upon this new significant development. Jonathan was clearly becoming highly suspicious, actively searching for assets that he genuinely believed were rightfully his property. How much time would pass before he uncovered the complete truth? And when that moment arrived, what course of action would I choose to take? The significant question Robert had posed within his letter loomed larger with the passage of each day. Had Jonathan successfully proven himself worthy enough to share in this unexpected wealth? Thus far, his demonstrated actions had only served to definitively confirm Robert's previous concerns regarding his character. However, individuals possess the capacity to change, don't they? The son I vividly remembered from years past, the one who possessed compassion and genuine emotional warmth. Was that essential person still located somewhere deep inside, buried beneath layers of intense ambition and self-entitlement? I did not possess immediate answers yet, but for the very first time, I felt sufficiently strong to patiently wait for those answers to eventually emerge. The cottage, much like Robert's enduring love, had successfully granted me not just physical shelter, but something vital I had been severely missing for far too long, the necessary space and profound security to fully trust my own innate judgment once more. 2 weeks following my successful settling into the Carmel cottage, I had established a comfortable daily routine that felt simultaneously novel and entirely natural. Mornings consistently commenced with coffee enjoyed in the garden or invigorating walks along the beach when dense fog did not heavily shroud the coastline. Afternoons were dedicated exclusively to attending to practical financial matters, meeting with financial advisors, learning comprehensively about the properties Robert had secretly acquired. And fully understanding my newly acquired circumstances, I had initiated the process of appreciating the full extent of Robert's meticulous planning. The cottage represented merely the most personal aspect of a comprehensive strategy designed to guarantee my absolute independence. The income-generating properties consistently produced substantial monthly revenue. Simultaneously, the investment portfolios were managed conservatively, prioritizing long-term stability rather than aggressive growth projections. Your late husband exhibited an unusual level of thoroughness, remarked Howard Lent, the financial advisor who had worked secretly alongside Robert. Most clients primarily focus on the accumulation of assets. Robert was equally concerned with establishing robust management systems that would not unduly burden you with daily operational decisions unless you actively desired that level of involvement. I was currently situated in Howard's Monterey office, meticulously reviewing the quarterly statements for the various trusts Robert had established. He knew I lacked his expertise for intricate financial details. I acknowledged. Howard responded with a smile. He did mention that specific fact, but he also stated that you possessed excellent judgment regarding individuals and an intuitive comprehension of value that he greatly respected. This sudden glimpse into how Robert had confidentially spoken about me to others was unexpectedly deeply moving. Even while he maintained the secrecy of his plans, he had consistently held faith in my inherent capabilities. There is one particular matter we should address, Howard continued, subtly altering his tone. We have received inquiries initiated by a Jonathan Campbell, who asserts he is conducting a review of his late father's financial affairs. My hands instantly tensed around the teacup I was holding. My son. What precisely did he want to ascertain? He was actively fishing for specific information regarding additional accounts or investments beyond what had been formally disclosed in the will. I adhered strictly to protocol and professionally explained that client confidentiality prevents me from discussing any accounts without appropriate legal authorization. Thank you, I said, a clear sense of relief evident in my voice. Jonathan received his stipulated inheritance as clearly specified in the will. Robert's deliberate intentions regarding the remaining assets were unequivocally clear. Howard confirmed this with a nod. We will continue to maintain that position, but you should remain aware that he has demonstrated persistence, contacting several firms associated with your husband's investments. This specific news was not entirely surprising. Jonathan had always exhibited tenacity when pursuing something he genuinely desired, a trait that had successfully served him well in business contexts, but manifested as clear entitlement in personal interactions. I genuinely appreciate the warning, I conveyed to Howard. I am still actively determining the most appropriate way to handle this sensitive situation with my son. Driving back toward Carmel, I intensely contemplated the mounting evidence indicating Jonathan's active investigation. His initial suspicions, though vague at first, were clearly solidifying into aggressive pursuit. How much time would elapse before he discovered the exact location of the garage and its remarkable contents before he learned about the existence of the cottage? Before he fully realized the extent of what Robert had deliberately kept concealed from him? And perhaps more critically, what actions would I decide to take once that inevitable discovery occurred? I was still deeply pondering these crucial questions when I arrived back at the cottage to find an unfamiliar luxury SUV parked conspicuously outside. My heart immediately sank as I recognized the highly personalized license plate, J. Campbell. Jonathan stood directly on my doorstep, arms tightly crossed, his expression a distinct mixture of triumph and accusation. Found you, he stated firmly as I approached. Interesting place you've successfully acquired here, Mom. When were you intending to mention its existence? I managed to keep my voice perfectly calm despite my rapidly accelerating pulse. Hello, Jonathan. This visit is definitely a surprise. I bet it is, he retorted, pointedly glancing around the cottage property. Care to provide an explanation for how you suddenly transformed into a property owner in one of California's most costly coastal towns? I successfully unlocked the door, gesturing for him to enter inside. There was no point in deliberately creating a scene for the adjacent neighbors. I believe you had better come inside. Jonathan followed me, his intensely critical gaze examining every single detail of the cottage interior. I could virtually observe him mentally calculating its exact value, constantly measuring its inherent worth against his predetermined expectations. Charming, he remarked, the single word somehow conveyed as an insult due to his specific tone. So, this explains why you have been consistently avoiding my phone calls. You've been hiding away in a secret vacation home. I have not been intentionally hiding, Jonathan. I have been processing enormous changes and deciding the best way to navigate forward. I placed my purse down and faced him directly. How exactly did you locate this place? He smiled, entirely without warmth. I am not completely incompetent, Mom. When you vanished, I promptly employed a private investigator to successfully locate your whereabouts, a basic welfare check performed on an elderly parent who completely disappeared after exhibiting signs of possible confusion following her husband's death. The calculated, manipulative nature of his approach deliberately portraying me as potentially senile to justify. His invasive investigation impacted me like a physical strike. I understand, I responded. And this investigator successfully tracked me here. After requiring some effort, yes. The property records proved to be highly interesting reading. Apparently, Dad purchased this location 4 years ago, but meticulously kept it outside of his regular financial accounts. Jonathan's eyes narrowed noticeably, which led me to wonder what other secrets Robert might have concealed. I moved deliberately to the kitchen area, starting to fill the kettle for tea, a small physical action intended to buy myself necessary time. Robert made his specific decisions regarding the will for his own distinct reasons. The cottage was simply meant to be a surprise. Jonathan followed me, leaning against the door frame. A surprise, he repeated flatly. Similar to that utterly worthless garage located in the industrial district. Another one of Dad's infamous surprises. My hands froze immediately on the kettle handle. He clearly possessed knowledge concerning the garage. The crucial question was, how extensive was his knowledge regarding its precise contents? The garage was definitively part of his estate, I stated very carefully. Yes, the highly mysterious garage that absolutely no one could logically explain the purpose of. Jonathan's voice hardened considerably. I paid a visit to the location yesterday, Mom. The door remained securely locked, but the windows, despite being dirty, still permitted a quick peek inside when the light angle was correct. I maintained a neutral expression, although my heart was pounding painfully within my chest, and I observed enough evidence to confirm that there are numerous cars contained within. Vintage automobiles, based on the limited view I managed to discern. His jaw visibly tightened. Cars that are worth significantly more money than that penthouse Dad deliberately left me, the penthouse that now includes extensive maintenance fees that I can barely afford, seeing as the majority of the liquid assets were placed into restrictive trust funds I cannot easily access. So there was the partial truth. Jonathan had successfully discovered a fraction of the truth, but not its full comprehensive extent. He had observed the luxury cars, but likely did not realize their true substantial value or possess knowledge concerning the existence of the additional properties and investments. Your father independently made his own choices, Jonathan. The penthouse and the investment portfolio he bequeathed to you constitute substantial valuable gifts. Gifts? He scoffed loudly. The penthouse now requires hundreds of thousands of dollars in necessary repairs that I only discovered after initiating the renovations. The investment portfolio barely manages to cover my current existing commitments. Meanwhile, you are comfortably residing in a charming Carmel cottage and apparently possess ownership of a collection of classic cars valued at God only knows how much money. I deliberately poured boiling water into the teapot, the familiar, simple ritual effectively steadying my nerves. What specifically do you hope to gain from me, Jonathan? The truth would be a good starting point, he retorted. Did you possess knowledge about these secret assets throughout the entire time? Were you and Dad actively planning this complex manipulation of the inheritance? No, I stated firmly, meeting his gaze directly. I possessed absolutely no knowledge regarding the cottage or the garage until subsequent to Robert's death. I was equally as surprised as you are now. This unexpected admission appeared to momentarily catch him off guard. Then why did you keep this specific information concealed from me over these past weeks? Why did you disappear instead of providing an explanation? Because I personally required time to comprehend it fully myself, I answered truthfully, and because your demonstrated behavior immediately following the will reading certainly didn't exactly encourage confidence or collaboration. He flinched slightly, then rapidly regained his composure. I was extremely upset, discovering that Dad had essentially disinherited me in your favor. Disinherited you? I interrupted immediately, a tone of disbelief evident in my voice. He provided you with a multi-million-dollar penthouse and investment accounts valued at millions more. A mere fraction of the true wealth he apparently managed to conceal away. Jonathan's voice intensified. Those cars alone are worth what specific amount, Jonathan? I challenged him. How could you possibly know their potential value unless you have been actively investigating far more extensively than you are currently admitting? He showed a brief moment of embarrassment. I possess contacts within the exotic car community and performed some discreet inquiries based on the limited visuals I managed to obtain. Naturally you did, I quietly murmured, suddenly feeling profoundly weary of the ongoing deception and counter-deception. Would you care for some tea? If we are destined to engage in this extensive conversation, we might as well maintain some civility about the process. This mundane, simple offer seemed to successfully deflate some of his intense, self-righteous anger. He nodded agreement, taking a seat at the breakfast nook while I meticulously prepared the cups. As we sat facing each other across the small table surface, I observed something beneath Jonathan's intense indignation that I had not previously noticed, a subtle vulnerability, perhaps even underlying fear. Despite all his loud bluster regarding being unjustly cheated out of his rightful inheritance, was there possibly a deeper, more fundamental motivation fueling his relentless pursuit? Jonathan, I began gently, softening my tone. Why does this particular issue hold such intense importance for you? You have established a highly successful professional career, you own a beautiful home, and you possess a level of financial security that most people never successfully attain. What genuine difference does it make if Robert chose to leave additional assets directly to me? He stared intently into his teacup, deliberately avoiding making eye contact with me. It's not entirely about the money. Not truly. Then what exactly is the core issue about? When he finally looked up, I caught a brief glimpse of the child he once was, uncertain, actively seeking approval. It centers on what it signifies. Dad actively entrusted you with these significant assets, these closely guarded secrets. He did not implicitly trust me. And there was the definitive core wound beneath the layers of entitlement and anger. Not simply greed, but a feeling of profound rejection. In his perspective, Robert's careful, specific planning represented not comprehensive protection for me, but instead a clear demonstration of lack of fundamental faith in him. Oh, Jonathan, I sighed quietly. It was never focused on trust or the lack thereof. Your father was intentionally striving to establish security for both of us, albeit through highly different methodologies. By intentionally concealing millions in assets from me, his inherent bitterness quickly resurfaced, by secretly leaving you massively wealthy, while simultaneously making it appear that he had only left you nothing of value except a seemingly worthless garage. I took a deliberate, slow sip of tea, carefully considering the appropriate extent of what information to disclose. The moment for full disclosure had arrived sooner than I had anticipated, forcing a crucial decision I was not fully prepared to make. How much of Robert's underlying reasoning should I share? How much of the difficult truth could Jonathan emotionally tolerate hearing? The late afternoon sunlight slanted intensely through the cottage windows, casting elongated shadows across the kitchen table, where Jonathan and I sat in uncomfortable, uneasy silence. I studied my son's face intently, noting the familiar features that strongly echoed Robert's, yet somehow lacked the innate compassion that had consistently softened my husband's expression. There exists a letter, I stated finally, breaking the silence. It meticulously explains his decisions far more clearly than I could possibly articulate. Jonathan's posture immediately stiffened. A letter. You have possessed a letter detailing all of this and chose not to share its contents. It was specifically addressed to me, Jonathan, and given the manner in which you treated me subsequent to the will reading, I was not exactly eager to share something of such personal significance. I met his gaze steadily. You publicly labelled me a useless old woman and forcefully ejected me from my own permanent home. His eyes rapidly flickered away from mine, a clear hint of acute discomfort crossing his facial features. I was extremely upset. Individuals often say things they don't truly mean when they are highly emotional. Do they always? I inquired quietly, or do moments of intense high emotion simply serve to reveal what is habitually kept hidden? Rather than offering an answer, Jonathan gestured impatiently. This specific letter. Do you currently possess it here? I rose and walked directly to the study, retrieving both Robert's original letter from the garage safe and the backup copy I had located inside his messenger bag. Returning to the kitchen, I briefly hesitated before handing him the copy. Before you proceed to read this, I require you to fully understand one important thing. Your father genuinely loved you, Jonathan. Nothing contained within his actions was designed to intentionally hurt you, only to vigorously protect what he deeply valued. Allow me to be the sole judge of that assessment, he replied sharply, accepting the letter with barely suppressed eagerness. I attentively watched as he read the contents, his facial expression rapidly shifting from initial anticipation to sheer disbelief, and then transforming into something much darker and intense. His hands aggressively tightened around the paper document, his knuckles turning white as he reached the critical paragraphs addressing Robert's serious concerns regarding his character. When he finally concluded reading, he placed the letter down on the table with deliberate care, as if he feared his fragile control might entirely shatter if he moved too quickly or abruptly. So, he stated, his voice dangerously quiet and controlled. Dad concluded that I was what exactly? Too materialistic. Too inherently selfish to be safely trusted with the family wealth. He was concerned regarding the manner in which your core values had noticeably shifted over a period of time. I gently corrected him. And concerned about how you might handle possessing authority over my independent financial well-being. And his ultimate solution was to deliberately deceive me. To engineer this elaborate hidden scheme, making me falsely believe I received the valuable inheritance while simultaneously and secretly leaving absolutely everything of genuine worth to you. His voice grew progressively louder with each subsequent question, intense indignation clearly building within him. Do you possess any real conception of how intensely humiliating this entire revelation is? Jonathan, no. He abruptly cut me off, standing up so suddenly that his chair loudly scraped backward against the floor. You do not possess the right to Jonathan me using that patronizing tone of voice. Not after the contents of this letter. Dad actively manipulated me, testing me like some kind of laboratory rat to determine if I would successfully pass his twisted moral examination. I remained firmly seated, deliberately refusing to match his clear emotional escalation. Your father consistently made the most reasoned decisions he could, based strictly on observations he made over a period of years, not merely days or weeks. If his eventual assessment appears overly harsh, perhaps that specific point warrants genuine reflection rather than outright rejection. He restlessly paced the perimeter of the small kitchen area, palpable tension radiating intensely from every single movement. Reflection? You are actually asking me to reflect upon being portrayed as some kind of heartless monster within my own father's critical eyes. This is not precisely what the letter explicitly states, I pointed out accurately. It clearly expresses concern regarding certain specific tendencies, not a fixed, definitive judgment of your entire overall character. Jonathan stopped pacing abruptly to stare at me with obvious incredulity. Are you genuinely and seriously defending this specific action? He left you a significant fortune while intentionally setting me up to blatantly reveal my true nature. And apparently I failed his character test spectacularly by merely expecting to actually receive precisely what the legal will explicitly specified. There was clearly no productive purpose in arguing about his interpretation or characterization. In a certain sense, his interpretation was not entirely incorrect. Robert had undeniably created a sensitive situation specifically designed to reveal character through subsequent actions. And Jonathan's actions following the reading of the will had confirmed, rather than disproved, his father's significant concerns. The crucial question now, I stated very carefully, is determining where exactly we proceed from this specific point. He laughed, entirely without genuine humor. Where we proceed. That is unequivocally simple. As Robert Campbell's official son and heir, I possess every legal right to vehemently contest this entire arrangement. Hidden assets, secret trust funds, it all strongly suggests a deliberate attempt to illegally circumvent normal inheritance procedures. I had correctly anticipated this exact reaction. The highly intricate legal structures your father meticulously created are impeccable. Jonathan, the assets were unequivocally his sole property to distribute precisely as he saw fit. And he accomplished this through correct, proper legal channels. Fully documented and entirely legitimate. Contesting these arrangements would prove to be extremely expensive, exceptionally lengthy, and almost certainly utterly futile. You sound remarkably confident for someone who claimed to possess absolutely no knowledge regarding finances, he shot back immediately. I have engaged in several weeks of intensive consultation with highly excellent advisors, I replied evenly, maintaining my composure. The identical individuals who successfully assisted your father in creating these complex arrangements. Jonathan braced his hands firmly against the counter surface, his back deliberately turned toward me. For a lengthy period, neither of us uttered a sound. When he finally turned to face me, his previous expression had subtly shifted from intense anger to cold calculation. A look I distinctly recognized from the professional negotiations I had witnessed over past years. What if we successfully reached a compromise? He proposed, adopting a deliberately reasonable tone. A more equitable distribution strategy that fully honors Dad's explicit wishes while simultaneously acknowledging my established position as his only son. Surely exactly half of these acquired assets. No, I interrupted immediately, surprising both him and myself with my sudden firmness. I am not prepared to negotiate Robert's final, clearly stated wishes. The assets he specifically left to me are not merely about money, Jonathan. They represent his profound care, his strategic foresight, his fervent desire to guarantee I would never be dependent upon anyone's goodwill, including specifically yours. So that is the conclusion? His voice once again hardened noticeably. You intend to retain everything, justified by Dad's supposed paranoid suspicions regarding me. I then stood up, meeting him directly at eye level. What specific choices I ultimately decide to make regarding these assets moving forward will be contingent upon numerous determining factors. However, your strong sense of entitlement regarding them is certainly not supporting your case. My case, he scoffed. So I am now subject to a trial, too. In a way, yes, I openly acknowledged, determining that complete honesty was absolutely necessary. Your father's written letter granted me the discretion regarding the sharing of these assets with you, provided you successfully demonstrated certain specific qualities. Your conduct since his passing, particularly your interactions toward me, will significantly influence those eventual decisions. The bluntness of my assessment landed forcefully, like a physical impact. Jonathan stared intensely at me as if he were encountering a complete stranger. Perhaps, in reality, he was. The previously compliant, accommodating mother he had perpetually taken for granted had been replaced by a person possessing clearly defined boundaries and specific expectations. You cannot possibly be serious, he eventually managed to utter. You are genuinely intending to hold Dad's entire fortune hostage based solely on whether I successfully pass some subjective character evaluation. I am intending to fully honor the fundamental spirit of your father's wishes, I quickly corrected him. Which explicitly included protecting these substantial assets from being completely squandered or intentionally misused. He abruptly grabbed his car keys from the table surface. This matter is absolutely not concluded. Not by any extensive margin. Jonathan, I called out as he rapidly headed toward the door. Before you impulsively rush off to consult various attorneys, consider this possibility. What if your father was correct? What if this specific inheritance, the highly visible and prestigious portion, was precisely what you desperately needed to recognize certain difficult truths concerning yourself? He paused momentarily at the threshold without turning around. Spare me the philosophical lectures, Mom. I have absorbed sufficient Campbell family wisdom for a single day. After the door slammed shut loudly behind him, I slowly sank back into my chair, profound emotional exhaustion washing completely over me. The intense confrontation had transpired almost exactly as I had initially feared it would. Jonathan focused entirely on what he firmly perceived as rightfully belonging to him, showing absolutely no genuine concern for my overall welfare or any acknowledgement of his prior detrimental conduct. Yet, beneath his visible indignation, I had discerned something else crucial. The deep hurt experienced by a son who strongly felt his father had critically judged him and found him inherently wanting. That underlying pain was undeniably real, even if his subsequent response to it was highly problematic. I prepared myself a fresh, hot cup of tea and carried it outside to the garden, actively seeking comfort in the mild coastal breeze and the late afternoon sunlight. Robert's written letter had accurately predicted this precise moment and had specifically prepared me for Jonathan's strong reaction. What the letter had not successfully prepared me for was the immense weight of becoming the definitive arbiter of his character, of holding the significant power that Robert had consciously entrusted solely to me. My phone suddenly buzzed with an incoming text message from Margaret. "Saw your son departing in quite an obvious hurry. Is everything all right? I am preparing lasagna if you would appreciate some company tonight." The simple, unexpected kindness brought forth tears to my eyes. "Company would be absolutely wonderful," I promptly replied. "It has proven to be a particularly difficult afternoon." As I watched the sun initiate its descent toward the Pacific Ocean, I intensely contemplated the forthcoming path. Jonathan would almost certainly consult legal professionals, although any subsequent legal challenge would ultimately prove to be entirely futile. The fundamental question remained whether this confrontation would successfully drive him further into entitlement and deep resentment, or whether, as Robert had sincerely hoped, it might eventually stimulate genuine self-reflection and personal growth. Regardless of the outcome, I possessed crucial decisions to make concerning the valuable cars, the acquired properties, and precisely how much financial assistance to offer Jonathan, and under what specific conditions. Robert had bestowed upon me not just substantial wealth, but also significant responsibility, a final crucial act of faith in my judgment that simultaneously honored and burdened me. For the present, however, I intended to have dinner with my newfound friend. I would persistently continue establishing my life here within this peaceful cottage, and I would consciously grant Jonathan the necessary space to adequately process his intense anger and profound disappointment. I continued hoping that somewhere deep beneath the entitled man he had demonstrably become, the thoughtful boy we had carefully raised might still continue to exist. Patiently waiting for the opportunity to emerge, spring eventually returned to the area of Carmel, painting the cottage garden with vivid bursts of color that seemed impossibly vibrant when contrasted against the stunning blue backdrop of the Pacific. Nearly 9 months had successfully elapsed since Robert's death. 6 months had passed since my unexpected discovery of the garage's true contents, and for months since Jonathan's severe financial crisis had forced a necessary reckoning between us. Those 4 months had successfully delivered significant changes I could never have possibly envisioned during our highly tense conversation held on the cottage patio. After 3 days of complete silence following my conditional offer, Jonathan had initiated a phone call with a response that profoundly surprised me due to its unexpected simplicity. "I'll accept it, all of it, whatever is required." The journey embarked upon since that acceptance had proven to be neither simple nor entirely smooth. The complex financial restructuring alone had demanded weeks of highly intensive work alongside skilled accountants and specialized attorneys, successfully uncovering the full, comprehensive extent of Jonathan's financial entanglements, some of which were significantly worse than he had initially disclosed. The ongoing situation with the penthouse necessitated difficult decisions, ultimately leading to a workable compromise, completing only the essential renovations required to make the property marketable. Then proceeding to sell it to successfully cover the most pressing outstanding debts. More challenging than these practical matters proved to be the required emotional work Jonathan had voluntarily committed to undertaking. Weekly therapy sessions with a specialist focusing on family dynamics and financial psychology had initially been approached with strong skepticism, but gradually evolved into a valuable source of genuine insight. Our personal relationship also entered completely new territory. Territory neither of us navigated perfectly, but marked by increasing honesty demonstrated by both parties. I was currently tending to the roses that artistically framed my garden gate when an unfamiliar car pulled into the cottage driveway. A woman emerged from the vehicle, tall in stature, professionally dressed, exhibiting the brisk efficiency typical of someone accustomed to managing crisis situations. She approached me with a business card already extended forth. Mrs. Campbell, I am Diane Reeves, Jonathan's personal assistant. May I speak with you very briefly? Something conveyed in her demeanor, tense and urgent beneath the professional facade, sent a ripple of genuine concern through my thoughts. Of course. Is everything completely all right? She glanced around the vicinity as if internally assessing the level of privacy. Perhaps we could speak more privately inside. Inside the cottage living room, Diane perched tensely on the edge of the chair, declining my offer of tea. Mrs. Campbell, I am here because Jonathan has unfortunately experienced some significant setbacks recently. He specifically requested that I speak with you directly, as he felt you might not readily accept his direct phone call. What kind of setbacks are we discussing? I inquired, although a sinking feeling strongly suggested I already knew the nature of them. Primarily financial setbacks, she confirmed. She opened a thin portfolio she had been carrying. The renovation costs associated with the penthouse far exceeded initial estimates by nearly double the amount. There were serious structural issues that absolutely could not have been anticipated, requiring substantial additional financial investment. I nodded, completely unsurprised. Robert had specifically mentioned the building's aging infrastructure years ago. Although his suggestions regarding preventative maintenance had been dismissively characterized as unnecessary expense, simultaneously, Diane continued. Jonathan's primary substantial investment unexpectedly failed. He had committed significant capital to a large development project that subsequently encountered unforeseen regulatory obstacles. The specific details are highly complex, but essentially he is facing significant monetary losses with very limited liquid assets available to successfully cover them. I understand, I stated. I maintained a completely neutral expression, although a part of me had been anticipating an event such as this. Jonathan had consistently favored aggressive investment strategies, preferring dramatic, rapid gains over slow, steady growth. And how precisely does this situation involve me? Diane shifted noticeably in her seat, appearing uncomfortable. Mrs. Campbell, to speak plainly, Jonathan desperately requires immediate financial assistance. He is fully aware that you possess resources that could effectively help him avoid bankruptcy proceedings and the loss of the penthouse property. There it was, the precise request I had been expecting since our confrontation for months prior. It was not an apology, nor an attempt at reconciliation, but solely a financial appeal delivered via an intermediary to successfully circumvent the personal humiliation of asking directly. Has Jonathan thoroughly considered selling the penthouse property? I asked. Even in its partially renovated state, it would likely cover the majority of his outstanding debts. He has explored that specific option, Diane acknowledged. Unfortunately, in its current state, mid-renovation, the property would only sell at a significant loss. Additionally, there are complicating issues involving some of the contractors that make an immediate quick sale problematic. Translation: Jonathan had probably alienated the construction team through excessive demanding behavior or payment disputes, thereby creating additional logistical obstacles. I appreciate you taking the time to come and explain the situation clearly, I stated after a brief pause. Please inform Jonathan that I have successfully heard his request and will give it careful consideration. Diane looked noticeably startled by my non-committal response. Mrs. Campbell, the existing situation is incredibly urgent. The formal foreclosure proceedings could realistically commence within a few weeks. I fully understand that seriousness, I replied, my tone remaining firm but not intentionally unkind. And I will require adequate time to thoroughly consider my formal response. This is the only commitment I can offer today. After escorting the clearly dissatisfied assistant out the door, I sat quietly in my garden contemplating the gravity of Jonathan's predicament. Robert's letter now seemed almost profoundly prophetic. He had accurately anticipated that Jonathan's financial decisions might eventually culminate in a significant crisis, thereby creating the precise unfortunate scenario we now faced. The subsequent morning, instead of immediately calling Jonathan, I drove straight back to the city to personally assess the penthouse situation. The building's doorman, recognizing me from my many years residing there, allowed me to proceed upstairs without needing to place an advance call. What I encountered upon entry was profoundly sobering. The once elegant home had been completely gutted down to the studs in most areas, with exposed wiring and plumbing creating a genuinely hazardous maze. Construction equipment sat clearly abandoned, coated with a fine layer of dust strongly suggesting weeks had passed since any actual work had been performed. Expensive materials like marble and custom fixtures were haphazardly stacked, some pieces already damaged due to improper storage methods. As I cautiously navigated my way through what had previously been our family home, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness resulting from the destruction of spaces that housed numerous memories, frustration concerning the obvious waste and severe mismanagement, and an unexpected sense of gratitude for Robert S.'s significant foresight in protecting me from having to rely on Jonathan S.'s questionable financial judgment. I was closely examining water damage extending from the master bathroom into the adjoining rooms when I suddenly heard the distinct sound of the front door opening. "Mom," Jonathan's voice distinctly carried through the gutted space. "The doorman informed me you were present." He appeared in the doorway, and I was immediately struck by how significantly different he looked compared to our last interaction. His normally immaculate appearance had slipped considerably. His clothing remained expensive, but was noticeably rumpled, his face clearly displaying the severe strain of sleepless nights. He had noticeably lost weight, the sharpened angles of his face emphasizing how closely he resembled Robert during his own difficult periods. I wanted to observe the situation for myself, I explained, gesturing broadly toward the demolition surrounding us. Jonathan ran one hand anxiously through his hair, a distinct gesture of frustration I recalled from his childhood. "I assume Diane conversed with you yesterday." I confirmed. She thoroughly explained your financial situation, and the singular word carried a heavy weight of expectation. And I needed to comprehensively understand the full picture before reaching any decision. I stepped carefully around a large pile of discarded fixtures. This current state is quite significantly different from how you initially described things when you commenced the renovations. He offered a short, humorless laugh. "Yes, well, circumstances rarely proceed exactly as planned in construction or often in life." "Jonathan, what exactly occurred with the investment project Diane mentioned?" Something embedded in my tone must have successfully broken through his defensive posture. He slowly sank down onto an overturned bucket, suddenly appearing utterly exhausted. "I heavily overextended myself," he admitted candidly. The specific development opportunity appeared absolutely guaranteed. Luxury condominiums situated in a rapidly up-and-coming area, with pre-construction sales already proving to be strong. I committed not merely the available capital, but aggressively borrowed against other assets, including the anticipated increased value of the penthouse following renovations. And then, an environmental review discovered serious contamination issues that had not been disclosed in the initial site assessment report. The subsequent legal mediation costs rendered the entire project non-viable. Investors quickly withdrew their funding. He vaguely gestured. The resultant domino effect proved to be comprehensive. I looked intently around at the widespread destruction surrounding us, both the physical demolition and the obvious wreckage of Jonathan's financial stability. "Why did you not reach out to me sooner?" I asked openly. "Before circumstances reached this critical point." His expression hardened slightly. "Following our last conversation, after discovering Dad's manipulation and your clear role in it, it was pride, I suppose, or maybe sheer stubbornness. The inherent family traits. Both are undeniably powerful motivators," I acknowledged, recalling similar instances of Robert firmly digging in his heels against practical considerations when his personal pride was threatened. "So," Jonathan began after a momentary pause. His attempted casual inquiry undermined severely by the palpable tension in his voice. "Have you reached your decision concerning helping me?" I met his gaze directly and firmly. "I am indeed willing to offer assistance, Jonathan, but not without imposing specific conditions, and certainly not by simply issuing a check to immediately cover all your debts." A blend of relief and immediate impatience battled visibly in his expression. "What precise conditions?" "We will need to thoroughly discuss that matter properly," I replied, carefully picking my way back toward the front door. "Not here, surrounded by the physical evidence of hasty, poor decisions. Travel to Carmel tomorrow. We will engage in a discussion about a path forward that addresses both your immediate financial crisis and the underlying patterns of behavior that initially created it." He appeared as though he intended to argue the point, to strongly push for an immediate financial commitment, but sheer necessity successfully overcame impulse. "Fine, tomorrow then." As I departed the building, the contrast between the heavily ruined penthouse and my serene, peaceful cottage in Carmel could not have been more striking. Jonathan had received what ostensibly appeared to be the significantly valuable inheritance, the prestigious address, the visible substantial wealth. I had received what seemed utterly worthless, an abandoned, dilapidated garage, and an unknown cottage. Yet, here we were now, our respective fortunes dramatically reversed through a distinct combination of Robert's strategic planning and Jonathan's demonstrated choices. Tomorrow would inevitably bring difficult, necessary conversations and challenging decisions. For tonight, however, I would return to Carmel, to the true home Robert had so thoughtfully created, and carefully consider the best possible approach to honor both his profound concerns and his enduring hopes for our son. Jonathan successfully arrived at the cottage precisely at the agreed-upon time of 11 a.m. the subsequent morning, his overall appearance noticeably more polished than the previous day. A conscious effort I strongly suspected intended to project a semblance of control he no longer fundamentally possessed. I had dedicated the entire morning to thorough preparation, not just mentally, but also physically, intentionally setting the ideal stage for our crucial conversation with meticulous care. "You have a lovely place here," he stiffly commented as I led him through the cottage structure to the back patio, where I had deliberately arranged comfortable seating and a light lunch. "Your father chose wisely," I readily agreed. He vividly remembered how deeply I appreciate the coast. Jonathan's expression tightened momentarily at the mention of Robert, but he remained silent as he accepted the offered seat. The patio space provided a view overlooking a small but meticulously maintained garden that gently sloped downward, affording occasional glimpses of the Pacific Ocean between the nearby neighboring properties. The setting felt inherently peaceful, private, and represented completely neutral ground for the challenging conversation awaiting us. After pouring us both iced tea, I turned to face my son directly. "Before we commence discussing your critical financial situation, I would like to show you a specific item." I handed him a leather portfolio I had carefully prepared that morning, containing specifically selected documents extracted from Robert's personal records. Jonathan opened the portfolio warily, as if fully expecting yet another unwelcome revelation. These particular documents contained financial projections and maintenance assessments specifically for the penthouse property. I explained clearly as he scanned the various pages. Your father personally commissioned them 3 years ago, anticipating the eventual major systems failures within the building structure. The detailed estimates closely correlate with the financial figures you have recently encountered during your renovations. Jonathan frowned deeply. Dad never once mentioned any of this information. He did attempt to, I gently corrected him. Several times you simply dismissed his concerns as excessive caution, unnecessary expense. He even showed you these reports during your last Christmas visit prior to receiving his diagnosis. A quick flicker of recognition crossed his face. The extremely boring building assessment he persistently kept bringing up during dinner conversation. The very one, I confirmed, taking a sip of my tea. Robert was not merely being cautious or overly worried. He was actively attempting to prepare you for exactly the serious situation you are facing right now. Jonathan set the portfolio aside abruptly, his jaw visibly tightening. If you brought me all the way here simply to pronounce I told you so on behalf of Dad. I have not done that, I interrupted firmly. I am currently establishing the necessary context for the decision I will make regarding offering you assistance. Robert clearly foresaw this outcome. Not merely the building's infrastructure issues, but the entire pattern of choices that has definitively led to your current crisis. And what precise pattern are you referring to? His tone was defensively charged, but I detected genuine underlying confusion beneath it. The pattern of consistently prioritizing outward appearance over underlying substance, I stated simply. Pursuing instantly impressive gains over reliable sustainable growth, casually dismissing sound caution as unnecessary pessimism. I met his gaze directly. The very same problematic qualities that led you to forcefully throw your own mother out of her home rather than fully considering her basic needs alongside your personal plans. He demonstrated the grace to momentarily appear abashed. That was wrong. I should not have handled the situation in that specific manner. No, I agreed firmly. You certainly should not have behaved that way. A heavy silence immediately descended between us, broken only by the distant murmur of ocean waves and the occasional cry of seabirds. Jonathan fidgeted slightly, unaccustomed to receiving this level of directness from me. Throughout his entire adult life, I had consistently acted as the mediator, the smoother of rough edges, the person who always accommodated his moods and absorbed his dismissals without complaint. So, what specific proposition are you making? He finally inquired. What precisely are these mandatory conditions for your help? Firstly, complete and absolute transparency, I replied. I require access to observe absolutely everything. All accounts, specific debts, existing contracts, all commitments, no hidden liabilities or conveniently omitted details. He nodded stiffly. Fine. What else is required? Professional financial management services moving forward, I continued steadily. You have clearly demonstrated that your personal judgment in these significant matters is severely compromised by impulsivity and intense overconfidence. Any funds I decide to provide will be meticulously structured through trusts with appropriate, independent oversight. His expression instantly darkened. So, I will effectively be placed on an allowance, like an immature child. Like someone who has committed serious financial miscalculations and requires necessary guardrails while actively rebuilding, I corrected him. It is not intended to be punitive, Jonathan. It is intentionally protective of both the existing assets and yourself personally. And I suppose you intend to personally control these specific trusts. Bitterness clearly edged his voice. No, I stated, surprising him. Independent trustees possessing fiduciary responsibility. I possess absolutely no interest in controlling your life, only in definitively ensuring that the assistance I provide genuinely leads to sustainable long-term improvement, rather than merely temporary short-term relief. He absorbed this information, visibly struggling internally between his desperate, urgent need for immediate assistance and his strong resistance to the implicit loss of personal autonomy. What is the eventual plan regarding the penthouse? It technically still remains my property. The most practical and logical solution would be to sell it, I stated clearly, closely observing his reaction. Even in its current existing state, it would successfully cover a significant portion of your financial debts. You could initiate a fresh start, perhaps within a more manageable property, sell it. The sheer idea appeared to genuinely shock him profoundly. But it is our family home. It's where Dad and you. It is merely a physical space, Jonathan, I gently interrupted. One you were intensely eager to gut and completely transform only a few months ago. The cherished memories do not physically reside within the walls of the structure. He suddenly stood up abruptly, pacing across the small patio area. You fail to comprehend. Selling the property would equate to openly admitting complete, utter failure. Everyone would know the truth. And there was the absolute core of his intense resistance. It was not genuine emotional attachment to our family home, but intense concern regarding the public perception of selling the property under severe financial duress. Image consistently prioritized over genuine substance, yet again. People are already aware of the situation, I stated quietly. Construction successfully halted months ago. Contractors have officially filed liens against the property. The financial community actively discusses these types of matters. He ceased pacing, his shoulders slightly slumping downwards. I truly have destroyed absolutely everything, haven't I? The raw, exposed vulnerability in his voice momentarily caught me off guard. For the first time since Robert's death, I glimpsed my true son beneath the defensive outward posturing, confused, intensely overwhelmed, and finally confronting the difficult consequences of years spent prioritizing false appearances over reality. Not everything is lost, I stated, my tone softening slightly. But you have successfully created a significant, profound challenge that will demand equally significant, necessary changes to effectively address it. Jonathan slowly sank back into his chair, suddenly looking completely exhausted. So, what specific assistance are you offering exactly? A structured, monitored way forward, I replied. I will definitively establish a trust that will satisfy the most urgent creditors and successfully prevent immediate foreclosure. We will bring in professional experts to either appropriately complete the required renovations or meticulously prepare the penthouse for eventual sale, depending entirely on what makes the most financial sense after thorough assessment. And in return, you must agree to mandatory financial oversight for a precisely defined period. You must work consistently with a professional counselor regarding the underlying behavioral patterns that initially created this critical situation. And I briefly hesitated, then continued firmly, you must make sincere amends for the unacceptable manner in which you treated me following your father's death. His eyes immediately snapped directly to mine. Amends. What precisely does that requirement entail? It means truthfully acknowledging the harm that was inflicted. It means fully understanding that personal relationships carry distinct consequences, just as financial decisions do. I leaned slightly forward. Jonathan, I am not offering this assistance purely as a transactional financial deal. I am offering it fundamentally as a mother who firmly believes her son possesses the capability to be better than his recent behavior strongly suggests. Something contained within my specific words seemed to successfully penetrate the armor he had maintained throughout our recent strained interactions. He quickly looked away, rapidly blinking his eyes. I did not genuinely mean the hurtful things I said that day, he stated quietly. About you being useless. I was simply extremely angry and lashing out violently. Perhaps I acknowledged the statement. But those specific words did not emerge from absolutely nowhere. They clearly reflected a deep-seated attitude toward me, and toward older women in general, that you have harbored for a significant time. He chose not to deny the statement, which itself represented a small measure of progress. I require adequate time to thoroughly contemplate all of this information, he finally concluded. It is an immense amount to process mentally. Take precisely the time you require, I replied, but remember clearly that your creditors' stringent timelines will not conveniently adjust themselves to accommodate your contemplation schedule. Certain crucial decisions possess only narrow windows of opportunity. As Jonathan left the cottage approximately an hour later, neither of us possessed definitive answers regarding the path directly ahead. I had clearly outlined my precise offer and its specific conditions. He had neither formally accepted nor explicitly rejected them outright. But something undeniably significant had shifted within our personal interaction, representing a tentative step toward genuine honesty that had been completely absent from our relationship for numerous years. That evening, sitting peacefully in the garden, as the twilight hour settled over Carmel, I found myself intensely wondering what Robert would have thought regarding my specific approach. Had I been excessively harsh, or perhaps too accommodating and lenient? There was no way I could possibly know naturally, but I experienced a quiet confidence that I had located my own personal balance, neither the excessively enabling mother I had occasionally been, nor the purely transactional business person Jonathan might have anticipated. The path forward remained inherently uncertain. Jonathan might potentially reject my conditions out of sheer pride, or formally accept them, while harboring hidden resentment, rather than achieving genuine understanding. But perhaps for the very first time in our adult relationship, I had articulated my truth clearly, without softening the message to protect his fragile feelings or to artificially preserve a false harm. Only, whatever subsequent events occurred would be built upon that newly established foundation of complete honesty, regardless of how uncomfortable it might prove to be. And in that fundamental truth, I firmly believed Robert would recognize the wisdom inherent in his unconventional inheritance plan, not focused on the distribution of material assets, but rather in the unique opportunity it had successfully generated for both Jonathan and me to finally perceive ourselves and each other with genuine clarity. 6 months after Jonathan's angry initial departure from the cottage, for months had passed since his financial crisis had forced a genuine reckoning between us. Those 4 months had resulted in positive changes I couldn't have previously imagined. Jonathan's required work with a family dynamics therapist began with skepticism, but became a source of insight. Our relationship also entered a new, more honest territory. I was tending the roses when Jonathan's assistant, Diane Reeves, arrived. She informed me of his financial setbacks. Penthouse renovation costs were doubled due to unforeseen structural issues, and his primary large investment had failed due to regulatory problems. He was facing potential foreclosure and needed financial assistance to avoid bankruptcy. I requested time to consider the matter and then visited the penthouse, finding it gutted and abandoned due to mismanagement and high costs. Jonathan confessed he had overextended himself by borrowing against future values, and contamination issues caused the investment failure. I offered conditional help, complete financial transparency, professional oversight, and making amends for his past cruel behavior towards me. He agreed to these terms after 3 days. The complex financial restructuring revealed worse entanglements than initially disclosed. The penthouse was eventually sold after targeted renovations were completed. Our relationship progressed with monthly visits to the cottage. Jonathan informed me of a job offer with a community development organization focused on affordable housing. He admitted the pay cut was significant, but the trust structure covered basic living expenses, and the work felt meaningful. He explained that the failure of his luxury condo project led him to consult for the non-profit that acquired the site. Realizing he was skilled at the technical aspects of development without needing to maximize profit. I affirmed that Robert would be pleased, as he valued competence directed toward worthwhile goals. Jonathan brought me a small package containing Robert's cufflinks and tie pins, which he had initially kept, but realized they were just things. He also returned my original wedding band, found in Robert's study safe. Inside the safe was a note from Robert planning a custom eternity band for our 45th anniversary. Jonathan had picked up the custom band sapphires and diamonds which I placed on my finger next to the original ring. I expressed deep gratitude for the meaningful gift. I told Jonathan I was keeping the Aston Martin and occasionally driving it along the coast, but the other cars would be sold. The proceeds from the sale would be divided between a foundation supporting financial education and a trust established for his future children. Jonathan called this optimistic. I replied that his father was an optimist at heart, believing people could grow when given the correct opportunities. As he left, I reflected that Robert's plan achieved security and independence for me and served as a catalyst for Jonathan to address his diminishing patterns. Not all wounds were fully healed, but we had begun a new chapter based on mutual respect and honesty. Driving the Aston Martin along the coast, I confirmed to Robert's memory that he had been right. The garage, once a symbol of my dismissal, transformed both my circumstances and our relationship. The seemingly cruel inheritance proved to be Robert's final act of wisdom and love for both of us. I felt a sense of completion, guided forward by the security of Robert's planning and the hard-won wisdom of knowing my own value. The garage key had ultimately unlocked something far more valuable than wealth, a new understanding of love, legacy, and the courage to begin again regardless of age or circumstances.